Case and then K, you said?
Yes, sir.
My mother didn't come all this way just so that I can be deported from this debate space. The fact of the matter is, my mother came here for a reason, an opportunity to live her dream. And her dream was for her family and herself to have an opportunity in this life, in the American lifestyle. But the fact of the matter is, this deportation discourse has been ultimately rejected on the basis that ableist discussion is what should be the first and foremost in this discussion. The fact of the matter is, it don't answer the objectivity just that coming away from all of the affirmative speeches that came from the very beginning. The Carlos and Rodriguez piece of evidence from 2013 talks about how if we don't re-engage ourselves back in the discussion of that deportation discourse, and that is ultimately where we ingrain apathy. It's not just apathy in the deportation discussion, you can also ingrain apathy into other forms of discussion as well. You can take this and flip-flop it around. If it were that way, then that means that ableist discussions would be the ones that people would be apathetic about. It's because you don't talk about them and you don't put them at the center. True, they made an argument that we're not putting ableism at the center. We'll talk about it on the permutation debate, which is pretty lopsided on this point in time. But the fact of the matter is, our role of the ballot is the one who best was to vote for the team who best affirms a counter-narrative of legalization. I believe that we have done that throughout the entirety of all of our speeches. We've told you what it means for us to be destabilizing of the United States federal government. We are telling you that we are destroying those boundaries of those binaries of what it means for people to be legal and for what it means to be people to non-legal. We're not just destabilizing the outside of this debate space, we're also destabilizing the norms of what debate space does to us, which is what the affirmative for the 1AC and the Speech Act of the 1AC was doing. We're not just having solvency here in this debate space for Joe and I, we're having solvency for spillover effects into the outside world where we can destabilize the United States federal government by telling them they don't have the authority of deporting people like my mother and myself. They don't have the ability to say who is illegal in this debate space and who don't have the ability to say who is legal. Legality is a question that should be taken away from the dominant narrative, and that is why we're offering a meta-narrative, which is why we're presenting our counter-narrative. The counter-narrative is operationalized by the fact that it makes our method known. It makes our method to a point where it is able to be preached out, not only in this debate space, but also into out around bases as well. What are you going to do after this? You're going to talk about it to your coach, right? And you're going to talk about how forms to better engage with this discussion. That's the form of discussion that we want you to be. We don't want you to just be spectators, I say again. We want you to be spectators to talk about this form of why it's important to have counter-narratives in these discussions. Their role of the balance, they say that the alternative can talk about deportation, but our role of the ballot can never talk about ableism. It's funny, because coming out of the cross-examination of the 1NC, you said exactly the opposite. You said that we don't have anything to do about what's happening within the debate space, and now you come up and say that we're just too focused about the debate space and not about the spillover. But yet, I'll make that same question to you. Where do you access any sort of solvency for your alternative or any sort of spillover for this debate? The fact of the matter is you don't, and you only say that this can't happen, that the alternative is mutually exclusive, but where are the warrants? I'm asking you that. That's why the permutation debate on the criticism is ultimately ineffectual for you, and you'll never be able to win. Why we can't perm, because you don't give a reason as to why our role of the ballot can't subsume yours. The fact of the matter is that we can make both of them centralized. We already indicated that from coming out of the 2AC and the 1AR. We indicated that a meta-narrative is a point in which we can make both discussions known, not only in this debate space, but also the debate space outside of what we're doing right now. And if you can't handle that, then I will assure you that there's a way we can do that through the permutation. You risk the destruction of the affirmative's role of the ballot if you vote negative. Coming out of the 2NC, he said this for when I talked about the dreams of those individuals who have been deported. The alternative can't do nothing about them. So don't you dare to come up here in your last speech and lie to me saying that our alternative can talk about individuals who are deported. Because that one either means that you are misrepresenting your alternative, or two, you don't even know what it means to dream about individual lives. Which means that you have to go back to the counter-narrative made back in the 1AC. Well, we dreamt about having a discussion about legalization, and this is what we're doing. We are talking about the dreams of my mother who wanted me to be here in this debate space. So I'll tell you, that's my dream. And that's how deported individuals can live through the dream. We can do your alternative, but your alternative simply can't do enough to solve for these in-round impacts and the impacts happening outside of the debate. now into the criticism, specifically the alternative debate. The alternative is inextricably linked to ableism studies, not subjective experience of ableism. They essentially reconstitute dominant narrative by saying that this is what ableism is and how it functions in the modern academy. They don't talk at all about how this affects the lived experience of disabled people. They speak of the exclusion of themselves as people with autism and expression-related disabilities, but they never tell you how their understanding of the 1NC or any of their arguments have affected their capacity to radically change the debate space for the better. They seem to be concerned with both solving the debate space and solving the world at large. One, they're in the debate space, their voices have value, but the seed of the judicial voices of their authors who they never identify as able-bodied or disabled. What value will it be to people with disabilities to affirm then an alternative crafted by able-bodied scholars? The permutation is the meta-narrative that gives possibility to at least discussions that interrogate these problematic experiences. The fact of the matter is, whenever we just use this academia to describe what it is to be ableist or what it means to be legal, we just re-entrench ourselves with their own opinion, and that's ultimately problematic, which is why we need to offer what the Hampton 2011 evidence indicates is a meta-narrative, to offer the narrative of those who have experienced disabilities, those who have experienced illegality, which is why our Petrokovic 2014 says we don't have to solve for deportation outside there in the real world. We just need to craft that meta-narrative from a subjectivized perspective so that we can fully understand what it means to be disabled. You say you have a friend outside this debate and why don't you talk about him and how ableism has affected his life. Now, you have the ability to do that. We're not saying you're not caring, but we're saying that it is not enough to reach to the people inside this debate space and outside the debate space.